And that is where the value is, who you become going to the destination and not the destination itself. Yeah, a successful business, a family, whatever it is, those things are all great, but it's who it takes to have those things. I think that's where the true value is. What would I need to do to be the hero in my own story? I think that's something that I think that's the path that we can use to answer that question, is be the hero in your own story.
Hey, Cody, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, man. I appreciate it.
Welcome to Peak Performance Perspective, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. Now, as an entrepreneur, as a fitness advocate, as a personal growth enthusiast, a mindset coach, owner and founder of a landscaping company, what does peak performance mean to you?
I think this is a really important question because the definition explains why. I think peak performance means performance that is your best that you can maintain over a consistent period of time. If you break down the words individually, maybe peak performance doesn't necessarily mean that. To me, that's what it means. I think the reason that's so important is because you have to know how you can be consistent and where you can be consistent, because otherwise your performance is not going to be at its peak if you can't be consistent at it.
Consistency is one of those things. Everybody wants it, but nobody can have it, or very few can have it. Going to the next year, those who are listening to this, when they're saying, I want to be consistent with my workouts, I want to be consistent with personal development, I want to be consistent as being a better husband, a better spouse in my business, what are some things we can do to bring about this consistency that just seems to be so elusive?
I think the first and most important thing is to realize that consistency is a direction and not an action. So you can go to the gym, but if you overtrain consistently, you're actually moving in the opposite direction. So I think the first thing to understand is that the awareness that consistency is a direction towards your goals, towards the life you want to have for yourself, whatever that happens to be for you. But I think as far as maintaining consistency, it is understanding where your peak performance window is and maintaining that. And of course, you can only do that if you push yourself past that point and then figure out where you can back down to maintain consistency. Because what I tell people all the time, if a guy works 4 hours every single day, some people may say maybe he works half a day, but if he works 4 hours, 7 days a week, he's going to work more than the guy who works 16 hours one day. So it's all about finding out where that level is for you. And that's one of the things you're not going to know until you put yourself out there, until you try and show yourself what that level is.
Can you share a moment from your life when you realized that mindset was a critical factor and it's going to play an important role in your success?
Man, yeah, there's so many different ways to answer that question. I think the most applicable would be you have a business scenario, you lose a client, you get overlooked on a certain thing that you feel like maybe you should have been chosen for. I think one of the best shifts I had, and there's been multiple shifts like this, is to look at these things that you think are failures, that you think are for some reason negative. If you can flip that and say, okay, I wasn't chosen for this job. That doesn't mean I'm not competent. I mean, maybe it means you're not competent. That's something for you to explore, but it doesn't mean that doesn't mean that you're not worthy of it. Doesn't mean that you're not able to do the job. It's just, if you take these things that happen to you that seem negative and self-reflect on them, those are actually the best periods that you can learn to grow. You can learn from those things way more than you can what seems to be successes. And so to answer the question, it would be anytime that I worked hard on a big proposal and I felt that maybe in the moment I felt that just because I worked harder on the proposal, that means I should get the job. Not necessarily, because again, are you working in the wrong direction? Another situation was we had a big client, thought we did a great job for. They had new management come in, wanted to make some changes, and rightfully so. I'm not saying that they were wrong, because it turns out the people they hired were able to do more than us. And in the moment, that was something that was really hard for me to see. Was like, man, we've been working for these guys for 2-3 years now, and all through COVID, never skipped a beat. Like, why is this isn't fair? Like, why did this happen? And of course, that mentality is toxic, and that's the beginning of a downward spiral. Because if you look at every single bad thing that happens to you like that, you don't have any periods of growth, because it seems like everything is somebody else's. I don't want to get off on a tangent here. That leads us to the victim mentality. But to answer your question, it would be any of these times that seems like it was quote unquote a failure, and you had to extract the lesson out of that. I think that would be the biggest mindset shift that was beneficial to me.
Sometimes things happen in our life that are unfortunate, that changes the trajectory of our life completely. How did the loss of your mother shape your approach to life, business, and personal growth since then?
Yeah, I'm careful talking about this for one reason. For one thing, her death involves another family, and out of respect of them, I want to be careful how I proceed with this. Losing my mother at the time and the way it happened was, I think it showed me that all these things are temporary. Even the bad things are temporary. All these moments are temporary. Again, going back to what we just talked about, this is something that's bad. It was was terrible. It was horrific. It was that like, there's no way I would say I would voluntarily choose this, but this is where we are now. Like you're already in pain at this moment. You're already suffering in this moment. Are you going to suffer for no reason whatsoever? Or are you going to use that pain to motivate you, to push you, use it for fuel to get to the next level, whatever that happens to be for you? And so there's a lot of different lessons that's wrapped up in that experience of losing a parent. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate to that. I think one of the things that kind of taught me is that everything's temporary. The people in your life are temporary. The good things are temporary. The bad things are temporary. You have to learn to be your own biggest cheerleader, because there may be somebody around you, whether that's a mother, a father, a sibling, a spouse. These people may cheer for you, maybe a bigger cheerleader for you than you feel that they are. But at some point, you have to be able to motivate yourself, because at the end of the day, that's who you have 24 hours a day is yourself. And I think that if you're not grounded with that, if you don't have a solid sense of that identity, however you find that, some people find it in ways that are less painful than this, but however you find that sense of identity, you have to understand who you are, because anytime we're going on a pursuit, a goal, a career, whatever it is, there's going to be things that come along to test you, and you have to know how to respond. And you do that through your identity, through who you are, who you see yourself as.
Difficult times can turn us into somebody who's more resilient. But sometimes we don't know how far to take that. Sometimes the attitude of, okay, this is a curve life is throwing me, this is an obstacle life is throwing me, I need to overcome it, I need to be strong. We take it to a level where we're almost detached from everybody else. We become cold. On the other side, the extreme is somebody who's just not able to cope with it, who's talking about it all the time, right? They're ruminating over the past. They haven't been able to move on. You, in your individual life and professional life, have somehow strive to maintain a balance in between still being open and vulnerable, but also resilient to be able to do the things you need to do. Those who are listening to this, who are struggling with it, how did you do that?
Okay, for the first thing is, I think some of the best experiences in life can only come to you. You can only experience them when you are open and vulnerable. Falling in love with somebody, experiencing a sunset, something that we really find beauty and admiration in. We can only experience these things when we are open and vulnerable. But I heard a quote one time, and unfortunately, I don't know who said this, but it said that the difference between a villain and a hero, when a villain is hurt by the world, the villain says, I'm going to hurt the world back. A hero is hurt by the world. He says, I'm going to make sure the world doesn't hurt anybody else. And so it's taking this, whatever this thing was that made you not resilient, because resilient comes after, whatever is the excuse that nobody would blame you for if you were bitter at the world. Whenever you take that thing and you say, okay, I'm going to decide to do this with it. I'm going to decide to protect the people around me in whatever way that is. I'm going to decide to grow this, start this business, whatever that seems to be. When you make that decision, you have to decide for yourself if you're going to be a hero or a villain. And I've used this example before. I'm sure you've heard about the inner child. Your audience, some people in your audience may have heard the inner child. It's if you're not going to be a hero to the world or to the people around you, at least be the hero to that younger version of yourself. Think back about who you were as a child, or maybe even a teenager, whatever that happens to be for you. Just think back to that time and think about, okay, this is where I am now as a 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old, 60-year-old man. How would this person, the child me or the teenage me, what would I need to do for that person to look at me and admire me and want to be like me one day? And so it's crazy, man, because we think about we have these goals for ourselves and we have this life for ourselves, and we think about the future, the past. Something that is fascinating is that when you have the inner child you, or that past version of you, and you had the future version of you that you aspire to be, we are the bridge. The present us is the bridge that connects the two. And so I know it sounds crazy and it sounds oversimplified, but the inner child you meets the future you that you aspire to be through the present you. That's how it happens. And so people have talked about this. Joe Rogan's talked about this. A lot of people how I feel to be a resilient people have talked about being your own hero. So I think that's one of the ways that really helped me, was to say, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what happened. What would I need to do to be the hero in my own story? I think that's something that I think that's the path that we can use to answer that question, is be the hero in your own story.
Sometimes when we dig within ourselves, we know what we want to do. We may not be sure how to go about it because we just figured out the journey, but we know what we want to do. But there are forces around us, friends, family members, mentors, who may not support us, who may put doubts on our mind. How do you stay true towards that inner child and take on a challenge that seems impossible whilst navigating through the negativity that surrounds us?
I think whatever the source of negativity is, whether that's a challenge, a person who doesn't support you, whatever that might be, I think the biggest way to stay true to that direction is understanding that what you're trying to do, the goal you're trying to achieve, is tied to a higher purpose. That purpose might be a legacy. It might be starting a business, growing a business, whatever it is. That purpose is way bigger, much bigger than you are. And so you don't have these, you don't have this support circle. You don't have these people around you. You are experiencing these things that make it difficult. And that is painful in the moment. But if you can stay dedicated to the higher sense of purpose, to the higher goal that is much higher than yourself, you say, okay, it might be painful right now, but this higher purpose is worth it. And specifically for those people who don't have a support structure, I think one of the best ways to stay, again, to bring this in, to stay strong and grounded in that is that strong sense of identity, is understanding who you are. And unfortunately, a lot of us do not have that support system. If we want to start, especially starting a business, because it's so risky, or trying to, unfortunately, for some people trying to start a family or pursue an education or whatever it might be, a lot of times people are not going to understand it the way that you do. They're not going to, because it is your story. They're not meant to understand it. So using the sense of purpose and the identity attached to yourself is the way I would do that.
What is your higher purpose that's leading you on your journey?
I think it's, again, going back to the hero. I think I have this version of myself that I aspire to be. I think I have this younger version of me who looked up to a specific person, and I'm trying to bridge the gap there. I think that for the longest time of my life, I didn't really know what it was that I wanted to do. I started a business very young, which a lot of people were not doing. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that the path that my friends were taking, which was college and getting jobs and those kind of things, I felt that it was draining my soul. But I'm doing now, building a business and maintaining a business, trying to scale a business, and then now to teach others how to do that, coach others how to do that. That is an incredible sense of higher direction than myself. And it's something that I spend a lot of time and energy these days pursuing.
You started Absolute Landscapes at the age of 20, an age that, like you said, not many people are starting businesses. What motivated you to do that at that age?
I tell this story a lot, man, and it's not really anything spectacular or crazy. It's just I had these jobs around me. I had warehousing jobs. I had construction jobs. I mean, you name it, I had it. And the people around me, this was decent money for what it was. The people around me were happy with these jobs, but I just felt that I was supposed to be doing something more. I was supposed to be doing something else with my life other than that. And so landscaping was something that I knew a little bit about. I felt like it was very easy to start. Everybody knows how to mow grass type thing. But yeah, I felt that I was supposed to be doing something else. And I simply could not breathe working at a company, as they say, punching the clock, so to speak. It was not for me. And I said, you know what? I think I can do this. I see these landscaping companies around me. They're doing this. I think I can make this work for myself. And then that was a catalyst of a decade long of failures and hits and experiences and successes and the whole deal. But it was for sure one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I tell people all the time, even if you're on a path, on a destination, you don't make it, let's say you don't make it to the destination physically or monetarily or financially, whatever it happens to be, you become a person through the process. And that is where the value is, who you become going to the destination and not the destination itself. Yeah, a successful business, a family, whatever it is, those things are all great, but it's who it takes to have those things. I think that's where the true value is.
You not only started this business, you scaled it, then you transitioned from the landscaping business to residential to commercial. Over these years, having done so many things, what are some of the most important leadership lessons you have learned that you can share with the audience?
I think the best leaders are authentic. I think they're very self-aware. And I think just by the nature of those two traits, that's something that a lot of us, we have a hard time with, because we want to think that we're a good leader. We want to think that if we're trying to do a thing, if we have a vision for the thing, that everybody else should just automatically assume that vision and we should share the same vision. But I think the biggest leadership lesson I probably ever learned was going back to when we lost this big client. I was in a place where we were decent. We were okay for what we were, the size of the company. I guess you could say I got maybe a little comfortable. And of course, ultimately that led to losing that place because I did not continue to grow and scale. And that was really before a lot of the growth and scale started to take place. But I felt that had I been a competent leader at the time, what I would have done was continue to try to grow the business and reinvest back into my team, which I had a pretty good team at the time, but it wasn't where I really would like it to be. And I think that was because I didn't really have the self-awareness, didn't have the self-awareness to say, hey, this is great. What we're doing here is great, but we can do more than this. That doesn't even mean more clients. That just means take the services we're already providing. Okay, how are we providing these services? Can we do more services? Can we open up doors for more things to do for the same clients that we have? And so I couldn't see it at the time, but I'm grateful for it now because it taught me to it taught me to work on the business and to continue to improve. And as they say, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so I had to learn that lesson the hard way.
So, as someone who's always wanting to do the best he can, improve himself, and grow the business, grow his employees, how do you not get burned out? Because a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs are pushing too hard in too many directions, and it's going well, but they reach to a point where they just burn out. How do you avoid that?
So that answers a combination of things. First of all, going back to what we talked about, that the first, maintaining consistency, understanding where your peak performance is and where you can maintain that. Because if you try to compete with somebody else's consistency, whatever that happens to be, if they wake up at 5 a.m. and they're working 14 hours a day and you simply can't sustain that, you're going to burn out. You're not going to be able to do that. So you have to find out, again, what can you maintain consistently? What peak performance can you maintain? Another thing is, and this kind of relates to the purpose, Inky Johnson has a quote that people don't burn out in life because of what they do. People burn out because life makes them forget why they do it. So if you can stay connected to that why, to that sense of purpose, to that bigger sense of purpose, and that's what I'm saying, when you get to the point, because there's been so many times when I was just like, it's crazy that we're talking about this because I journal every day and I was, or a couple times a week at least. And I was reading back over just with the year ending and that kind of thing. I was reading back over some of the entries from this past year, and we had a lot of growth this year, which means a lot of things going on at one time. And so I had a journal entry that caught my attention, and it it said something along the lines of, I'm not the kind of person to quit, but if I was, this would be it. And then had some other stuff in the entry, and it ultimately led back to the higher purpose, the vision, the main goal. And that was probably because at the time that I wrote that, I was 100% outside of my realm of being consistent. I was outside of my optimal flow for peak performance for sure. I was probably doing, I don't want to say too much, but outside of my peak performance, I was probably doing too much at the time. Thankfully, that period didn't last long. But yeah, it's just understanding what you can maintain consistently and staying connected to that higher purpose, your why, as they call it.
Fitness is something that plays a big role in your life. How has fitness contributed to your mental, physical, emotional health?
So if I'm working with somebody and we're trying to increase discipline or any sort of routine, I think that fitness is just simply the easiest way to start it, because fitness does several things. It teaches you discipline. It helps you burn off stress. A lot of times for me, it provides clarity. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in the gym and I have a stressful email, or I'm trying to figure out the right words to use and I just can't find it, and go into the gym. I usually work out in the evenings, go into the gym and you're doing your thing, and halfway through your workout, it just comes to you. You just have that sense of clarity. So the fitness has done several things. And it's crazy that we talk about this actually, because here in January, I think I started working out actually January 5th or something, 2020. And so it's been almost 5 years now. And so one of the things that it's done, other than the clarity, is allowed me to be able to trust myself and depend on myself. Because if you have it doesn't have to be fitness, but fitness is a really good example. If you have a consistent program with yourself, you say, I'm going to do this 3 times a week or 5 times a week, or I'm going to do this every single Monday or whatever it is. And you keep these promises, you make these promises, keep these promises to yourself, you build this trust with yourself. Ultimately, what you do is you lead up to building self-confidence with yourself. And so it sounds crazy when you say fitness taught me self-confidence, and that's not because you look good, quote unquote, or you feel good or whatever. The reason that fitness for me has led to self-confidence is because I can trust myself. If I tell myself, if I'm going to do a thing and I do that thing, I trust myself. Why is that important? Because if you want to start a new business, if you want to pursue a new thing, you have this intuition about it. You're like, man, this is what I want to do, but I don't know. Everybody around me tells me not to do it. It's risky. Okay. You have two options. You can listen to what everybody else says. They're not connected to this purpose, or you can listen to what you say. Can you listen to what you say? Can you trust yourself? Let's look back over your track record. For me, it was fitness. Okay. I said I was going to work out, and I worked out. I made that promise. That was a very small win. I did that consistently. Then I told myself I was going to do other things. Did that. I said, okay, now I'm looking back over this. It looks like on paper, I'm a person I can trust myself. So we have this intuition, this thing we want to do. Let's do it. Let's go through with it. I feel that I can trust myself. So anyways, so fitness was, and then you had the physical stuff, the stamina, the energy, the mental clarity, which we talked about. One last thing that I'll say on this that we talk about with fitness, it's easy to talk about diet. You filter your diet. When you start going to the gym, you drink better, hopefully, you eat better, hopefully, sleep better, hopefully. But what a lot of people don't understand is that you're filtering your diet, but you're also filtering your mental and emotional and spiritual diet. You're filtering out the things that you consume when you get on Facebook and there's the negativity or whatever it is, the negative news articles. Like, you start to filter these things out, because it starts with your diet, and then maybe it goes to your social circle. Maybe you cut back on your alcohol a little bit. Maybe you cut back on your junk food. And then what that does, by extension, you exit certain environments. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I'm just saying sometimes it's not conducive to your personal growth. And fitness for me was a catalyst of just mental clarity, the physical health, the self-confidence, the filtering out where I surrounded myself, what information I was taking in to my mind, to my spirit. And that played a big role in ultimately who I'm trying to become.
You are also the host of your own Pure Wisdom cast. What inspired you to start this?
Man, somewhere along, I don't know, after my mother died, so that was 6 years ago or so, I had just this spark of just this catalyst for, I don't know, just learning as much as I could from YouTube, from podcasts, from audiobooks, whatever it was. And somewhere 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, man, I can do this. There's people starting podcasts every day. I can have a podcast and I can learn from other people. And then simultaneously, somebody can listen to us talk. They can learn, use that in their life. And so it was just this thing that started. It seemed like it was just like an avenue to learn more information, to share more information. And so that's where the inspiration for the podcast came from.
You are a role model to many men in your local community and obviously the larger community because of your heart and the work you do. Recently, there's a lot of societal expectation towards masculinity that impacts men's mental health. How do you think it impacts it, and what should the man listening to this do to improve his self-esteem and relationships in life?
Man, I hope you had the same audience that you had before this question, after asked questions. So I think where I would start with that, man, is just to stress the importance that as a man, everything that you do in life is going to be competitive by nature. If you're trying to build a business, if you're trying to get a job, if you're trying to pursue a woman, if you're trying to build a family, there's so much competition as a man. And I think that's healthy. I don't think we should go around just eliminate the competition for whatever we're trying to pursue. I think that we as men should understand that through working on yourself and through improving your life, if you do it the right way, and if you're doing true personal growth, everybody who is connected to you should benefit from that. So if you have a family, if you have employees, or if you mentor people in the community, whatever it is that you do, if you're improving yourself and you do it in the right direction, everybody that knows you, whether they're family or whoever, they should benefit from you improving yourself. And sometimes that's financially, sometimes that's just your wisdom, your knowledge. So I think a big part of this is to realize that is supposed to be competitive, and that you are competing against other men who want the same thing that you want. Now, with saying that, we as men sometimes have an issue with pride, and we as men sometimes have an issue losing. And so I would say that you have to be able to take a loss without it taking a hit on your personal identity or your self-worth. One of the ways that I found the best way to do that, I feel, is learning martial arts. And there's so many different positives to learning martial arts. But one thing that I really respect about martial arts is it allows you to take a loss, and it takes your pride out of the equation. So you get in there and you can even do this lightly, just lightly spar with somebody, do some jiu-jitsu or something like that. It teaches you how to take a loss. And I think that's one of the most important things that men can learn. But as I don't want to get off on a tangent here, to go back to the question of the responsibilities that society puts on men, I think if we can, we should take on that responsibility. We should accept it. I don't think that and this is so decisive these days, and I don't know why there's just this division, but it's like the best thing that a man can do with the pressure that is given to him is take that pressure and use it as fuel. Use it for a higher sense of purpose. I'm trying to tread lightly right here, man. This is
an important conversation that needs to be had. Say how you feel.
So I think that there are key roles that men should have in society. I think one of the best ways that one of the best things that a man can do is simply provide and protect for his family. And you can only do that if you are growing yourself. The problem is that we think about providing and we think financially, we think about protecting and we think physically. It doesn't stop there, because you have to be able to protect your partner and your family, not just physically, but also emotionally from yourself. And so you have an argument with your partner or whatever, and maybe you say something or your tone of voice was off or whatever it is. Your protection of her or whoever it is that you're into does not stop with the physical protection from the outside world. You have to say, okay, I'm feeling XYZ, anger or irritation or whatever in this moment. And you have to be self-aware enough to know how you're coming across to that person. So you do that through self-awareness. So through the personal growth, through the self-awareness, and then that is another way that we're talking about these responsibilities. We're talking about these financial responsibilities, these protective responsibilities, and the spiritual, because it comes from who you are as a man. And I don't want to get off on a tangent here. Okay, so I'm just going to end with this. If you are pursuing a higher goal, a higher sense of purpose, a higher sense of yourself, everybody who is connected to you should benefit. There seems to be, in the last years, there seems to be some sort of negativity that's been contributed to men pursuing a higher goal, or men being ambitious, or men being competitive. But that is what it takes to get to the place that you can be a better person for your family. I wouldn't think too heavily about some of the negativity that's put on this masculinity, because I would think that it is those traits that you need to have to get to those places.
As someone who's constantly trying to attain self-improvement in all areas of life, how do you go about structuring your day?
There is a routine. Ideally, when I wake up, I would like to, one of the first things I do is do a cold plunge. It's usually about 45 degrees, 3 minutes. It's difficult to get in that thing, man. It sucks. But again, you're keeping this promise you make to yourself. I tell myself I'm going to do this 4 or 5 days a week. I do this. I feel better always afterwards. It helps mental clarity and all these other things. Usually there's some sort of meditation, but always a source of prayer. There's a prayer ritual there, you'd say. And then found over the last couple months, has been really helpful to me. And I usually do that after the cold plunge, after the prayer or meditation. And I journal maybe about my day, about my week. If I have a dream, I might journal about that, which dreams are very powerful. Understanding dreams are very powerful. Then I usually get into what I call the most mentally demanding part of my day. It might be sales related. It might be staff related, whatever it is, the mentally demanding stuff. That's usually followed by the physically demanding stuff. And then after that, I taper off my day, usually with some things that need to be done that maybe are seem insignificant, because by that time you're exhausted. By that time you're doing all these other things during the day, you're exhausted by that time. And then usually in the day with, like I said, usually work out in the evenings. Sometimes I'll work out in the mornings, depends on the day, but usually my workouts are in the evenings.
What's one piece of advice you wish you could give to a younger self when you were starting out? Because somebody listening to this could be exactly where you were when you were starting out.
The biggest piece of advice is that sometimes the beliefs that you have about yourself is not really something that you actually believe about yourself. Sometimes we think about starting a business or pursuing an education, pursuing a partner, and we think that we're not able to do these things because what we think is that we're not worthy, we're not smart enough, we're not handsome enough, we're not strong enough, whatever the case is. But a lot of times what I've found is that, and I've talked to other people about this too, is that sometimes the things that you think you believe is something that was instilled in you by, unfortunately, a parent, unfortunately, a sibling, a community, an education system, unfortunately, sometimes a religious community. And you have to be aware that there's a difference in seeing yourself a certain way because of your experience with yourself, and hearing something for several decades of your life and just assuming that that's how you feel about yourself. And with my situation specifically, it was about the self-confidence, about the self-belief that, why am I starting a business? I can't do this. Nobody around me's done this. Why do I feel that I can my friends have nice jobs and they're happy with the money they're making and they're starting families and they're buying cars and this kind of stuff? What makes me feel that I'm entitled, quote unquote, to go start a business because I feel that I want something different for myself? And so there was a lot of these different things that I felt as a 20-year-old man starting a business. And I just would say that you have to understand that this is probably not something that you believe about yourself. Maybe you were in an environment, people were around you, whatever the case is, this is not something that you believe about yourself, because especially in my situation, I hadn't even given myself the chance. I was just basically, I want to be disrespectful to anybody publicly here, but I was basically just repeating what I knew to be true about what I thought about myself. And so you just have to understand, man, that what you have to understand where your beliefs are coming from. And you have to understand that you can change those beliefs about yourself when you get out and you prove yourself to yourself. When you get out and you make the hard decisions, you make the hard choices, you do the hard things. That's the only way to do it.
Cody, we live in a world where people say a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Men make promises they don't keep. They end up promising something dating to whoever they're dating, and they get married and they don't keep the promises. They make promises to their children they don't keep. They make promises to themselves they don't keep. So it's refreshing to meet a man only trying his best to keep the promises he's making to himself, but also the larger community, the people he serves, and his employees. And there's a relentless energy and drive within you, which is infectious. And those who get to interact with you on a daily basis, either personally or through a podcast, I'm sure they feel it and they benefit from it. You could have started your landscaping company and just stopped there. You didn't. You could have then grown into commercial and real estate and all of those things. You didn't. The fact that you learned what you needed to learn through life, books, mentors, and experiences, the fact that you're out there now sharing with the rest of the world, trying to take everybody to the next level with you, is what leaders are made of. So thank you for being on the show. How can my audience connect with you? Any last words that you have for audience members?
Yeah, man. First of all, I appreciate that. You can connect with me. I think the best way, there's the podcast. That's Pure Wisdom Podcast. That's on all social medias, all podcast platforms. The coaching, you can connect with me specifically for coaching, info@excelcoaching.academy. And of course, I'm on most social medias, Cody Jones, that's CodyJones. But yeah, man, I definitely appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate being here talking with you, and looking forward to working with you, hearing this thing back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's great talking to you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.